As of January 31st, 2022, I've seen all there is to consume of the Slayers franchise. This is all 5 TV series, all 5 movies, and the OVAs. I'm not the first person to get on here talking about Slayers, and I firmly believe I won't be the last. You just can't tap into the frequency that is 90s anime, particularly fantasy anime, and escape this franchise. Funny enough, I've talked about this in other videos like Years in Anime 1995 and Sorcerer Hunters, cough cough, the best swords and sorcery fantasy anime. But I did say that Slayers is the go-to swords and sorcery for anyone who's into that niche. Almost 3 years later, and I'm just now getting into it. This will be a complete franchise breakdown from top to bottom, from manga to anime. And don't close the video yet cause I took your ADHD into consideration and won't be extensively digging into every nook and cranny of every entry. Hopefully this video doesn't go on too long, but if it does, then watch some of it now and watch the rest when you get a chance. To understand Slayers would be to have a basic understanding of fantasy anime of the 80s and 90s, because Slayers is a parody of this. Yup, a parody. So it takes things from Lodoss War, Rayearth, as well as other fantasy medieval anime that predates it and made its own legacy. Not only that, it's heavily influenced by RPG games, as most classic fantasy were. The parody concept may not seem so serious to the modern era, because most people grew up with things like SNL, In Living Color, or South Park on TV. But in 1995, this would have been a big deal. It set the trend for later anime like Bastard or Gokudo. But Slayers is not such a parody to the point it's unbearable to take serious. It's done such a good job of solidifying itself as a real universe with real characters and real dilemmas that can fiddle your emotional strings. And that is what makes this thing so damn good. While the show is making fun of itself in its genre, it's still executing every element of its genre to the best of its ability. Yeah, we're gonna break it all down, but first, let's start at the very beginning. The year is 1989. The man is Hajime Kanzaka, and the publication is Dragon Magazine. They did a lot of other manga that you may know like Dragon Half, Pad Labor, Saber Marionette, and later High School DxD, Chrono Crusade, and others. As far as Slayers, it starts off as a short series, and eventually evolved into a light novel. Not a manga, a light novel. It would be 6 years before a manga would be published, and 2 came out that year. The one-off volume, Medieval Mayhem, and super explosive Demon Story, which ran for about 8 volumes. Also that year came the first animated entry directed by Takashi Watanabe for E&G Films, simply titled Slayers. And it's probably the main reason why you're even watching this video. So let's get into it. The first Slayer served as an establishing ground for the wonderful audience to get acquainted with our wacky cast of characters. And I might say that these are a bunch of idiots. After the first 3 episodes, the majority of Slayers becomes a generic but epic story about an evil sorcerer named Rezo trying to summon an ancient demon called Shabanigdo to regain his eyesight. The storyline kinda soaks up just about half this season, followed by some goofy episodic plots, following the cast in their travels, until old Rezo pops back into the picture. Well, kinda. The item of interest in this season is the Sword of Light. Not too much to complain about with this entry, aside from the second half feeling a little dragged out in terms of this quest to eliminate Rezo, but overall though, it has entertaining magic battles, a fair enough animation for that time period for all my fans of the 90s era graphics, and the laughing gags between Lina and Gaury the swordsman and Zelgadas leaves a good impression on you. And when it comes to Lina, without a doubt, it's her that really carries this show. Her duality of a brash but still feminine personality sets her apart from your average female lead, or honestly any lead for that matter. She's overly ambitious, strictly about her business, won't hesitate to whoop your ass, but can still fall back and play lighthearted.
Where monsters rampage, I'm there to take them down. Where treasure glitters, I'm there to claim it. Where an enemy rises to face me, victory will be mine!
See? She told you herself. The soundtrack for this season goes hard as hell too, serving as a time capsule for the year 1995. The closing theme for the season is by far one of my anime favorites, Kuji Kanekara, Because I'll Never Give Up in English. Performed by Megumi Hayashibara, you'd be surprised to know she's also the voice actress who played Lina in the show. And it doesn't quite stop there. She's the voice actor for Faye Valentine in Bebop, Jessie in Pokemon, and the most famous Rei Ayanami in Neon Genesis Evangelion. So about a month before the ending of Slayer's first season came the first Slayer's film, the motion picture, also known as Slayer's Perfect. Now I promised you we weren't going to be going into any extensive decoding of these entries in this episode, and I meant it, so I'll just be very brief here. There you go. As great as it looks aesthetically, I find that Slayers and a cinematic vibe do not gel well together. All of a sudden the comedy and cheerfulness don't feel right compared to the lower budget directing of a TV series, as crazy as that might sound. Compacting a dramatic story into a 1-hour film and trying to maintain the elements that make it Slayers, particularly the lack of seriousness, no thanks. Can't lie, this was cool though.
You're my last hope, Lina Inverse and sidekick.
Hey, wait a minute! What do you mean her sidekick?
So it's time to get into the second major TV series of the Slayers medium, Slayers Next. There's not too much different from the first season to this one, though most say that it's slightly better. But the way I see it, they could have just put the 2 seasons together as a 50-episode anime and called it Slayers. Well, that's what I believed at first. The adventures continue as our cast have a new objective, the acquiring of a sacred manuscript called the Clear Bible. In this season, our girl Lina kicks off a bunch of more gags with the gang, gains a few new enemies, and busts out a couple new moves. I gotta say, the pacing of Slayers is unmatched, because literally right down the middle of every single season, we climax with the major villain being revealed, which plays the vehicle for the remainder of the season. Initially, you may not know why people classify Next to be the superior to the debut, because initially it's the exact replica, to be honest with you. Until about midway, and then the intensity of everything you loved in season 1 amplifies. At times, the show lets its light and playful side shine, when you see the characters engaging in extracurricular activities like music and sports, and it even dabbles into a little romance. See, at this stage, most people aside from the completionists would have made their decision already about whether Slayers is for them or not. After a season and a movie, I can assure you not much changes from here on. Except the last quarter of season 2. My god, Lina. But still, if you weren't feeling it up to this point, there's not really a point to the rest of the franchise. For everyone else, you'd be happy to know the quality was maintained. Following the same format, a movie was released a month before the series ended, but about a month before that was the release of the first Slayers OVA series, the Slayers Special, also known as Book of Spells. And it was dog shit. In Slayer's Return, pretty admirable art and animation, I can't lie, but still dog shit. Anyway, of course, we wrap up the OG Slayers with the third and final season of the 90s, Slayers Try. Notorious for being the weakest season of all 3, in actual reality, it really wasn't a bad season at all. And some might dare to say it could really be the best one. See, my personal opinion in lamest terms, it did have the worst budget, worst story, and comedy, but was the most dramatic and action-packed if you catch my drift. So, if you didn't like the first 2 seasons, you may actually find that you actually like Try because it's the least Slayers out of all of them. It felt more like a standard old school fantasy action anime instead of a goofy one like we know Slayers to be. Don't get it twisted though. Try still had jokes and had a tendency to not take itself seriously at times, but it did show in other ways that Slayers had slightly changed this time around. What I really liked about this season was the introduction and variety of characters and their designs. There are a lot of obscure anthropomorphism going on in Slayers Try, and the world looks slightly different than it did the previous 2 seasons. Now, there wouldn't be another Slayers TV series for at least a decade after Try, but 4 more films were released to say goodbye to the 90s. Slayers Great, which actually wasn't bad. It kinda had this little hybrid of mecha and Super Sentai going for it, and kinda was laid back, fun, and most importantly, interesting to watch the whole way through. Then you had Slayers Gorgeous, which was gorgeously dog shit. The final OVA, Slayers Excellent, which dealt with a lot of dark subject matter like sacrifices. It certainly had its moments, but really wasn't nothing special. And finally, we had the final Slayers film, the shortest Slayers film, and the only one to cross into the turn of the century, Slayers Premium in 2001. Dog shit. Just that it was early 2000s dog shit. And it was the only Slayers film to actually include Gaury and Zelgadas and the other characters from the TV series, which automatically will let you know that the other movies are actually prequels to the TV series. So yeah, so for a while that was all there was in terms of the Slayers. See, throughout this time period, there were a bunch of Slayers video games including RPGs, tactical games, and that was pretty much it for the series. Until JC Staff came back in 2008 and 2009 and released the 4th and 5th seasons, Revolution and Evolution R. Now, I appreciate the 4th and 5th seasons for what they are. The OG versions embody everything that is retro anime, with cell animations and cheesier directing, while these ones were clearly trying to take the world of Slayers and bring it into the anime market of the late 2000s. The digital animation looked great, which there isn't much to be surprised about. The year was 2008. The music recycled some of the old soundtrack scores with new additions, and of course, since Funimation was responsible for bringing it to the West, you'll hear familiar voices in the dub. Another unique thing that they did was name each episode to start with the letter of the alphabet. 26 letters for 26 episodes, A through Z. Oh, by the way, I really enjoyed the animation of the fights in this version. It definitely leaned towards the more shonen battle route, or like kind of like a precursor to Madoka Magica, stuff like that. But it still maintained the fantasy and magical girl elements for an amazing blend. That's it for content, but I want to just dwell on for a second what fascinates me about how Slayers is. It's so esoterically charged. Now, I've used the word esoteric in other episodes before, and simply it means information that is secluded to a minority of people or understood by a small amount of people. Usually, it relates to spiritual things like magic and witchcraft. When watching this show, it goes beyond simple spell bombs being thrown at enemies and magical powers, as Slayers will go as far as to have Lina spend a minute or two to do rituals to cultivate treasure and manipulate certain elements.
Hey, that cheap pile of stones could really be worth something. But first I'll have to work a little magic on them. And I think I have just the trick. Source of all power. Flames that glow red. Now, to give it some major power. Mighty Source, now entrust your life force in this jeweled dust. Now then. Infinite Earth who supports all life. Oh, I hope it's gonna work. I'll be so happy. I did it. A magical amulet. I can charge a lot for this. Now I can sell this for a good price. Hey, I should make a bunch of these.
You'll also be given, this is more in the 90s one, but still, you'll be given shallow education on shamans and other spiritual practitioners, the astral planes, astrology, and other aspects of sacred knowledge.
As for the statue, the metal in the Orichalcon is sealing in some magical power. And that's probably so you could use it as some kind of spirit beacon. Let's say, for example, you were traveling on an astral plane and lost your way. This metal could guide your spirit back to you, which means that you could... Don't fall asleep when I'm being serious!
Blood sacrifices, there's all types of stuff in there. Also, that's another reason why you'll see tons of intentional one-eyed symbolism in here as well, if you pay close attention. I happen to understand that a lot of Japanese manga artists are well initiated into certain practices of the occult and witchcraft, and if that alarms you, you should just understand that on the eastern part of the globe, their foundation for spiritual beliefs for the most part are historically based into a lot of pagan practices such as Buddhism, Confucianism, Hinduism, Taoism, and Shintoism. And on this side of the globe, where most of us are born into these Abrahamic religions like Christianity, most of us are kind of alarmed when we see stuff like that. But anyways, guys, that's it for Lina Inverse and Friends. A definite classic with tons of variations for one to sink their teeth into. I'll wrap it up here. Like the video, comment down below what y'all want to see next. I'm out. Thanks for watching. Anime back when.